Hello and welcome to the big picture. The 160 members of the World Trade Organization who are gathered in Geneva presently to finalize and sign a trade facilitation agreement to reform customs rules worldwide are left on tenterhooks. Reason is India's hard stance that the deal be postponed till a permanent solution on public stockholding for food security is found. The FTA has been promoted by developed countries led by the United States, for whom this agreement is crucial to bolster their sagging economies to find markets worldwide. India, on the other hand, is not willing to sign the agreement in a hurry, even as the deadline for it, July 31st, draws near. India's stand has been criticized by the West, led by the US, saying that this could derail the entire WTO negotiations after the deal for this had been stuck in Bali, Indonesia last December. Will the Indian government be able to stick to its stand and force the World Trade Organization to put off the FTA and agree to its suggestion to work out a comprehensive deal which includes a solution to the public stockholding for food security? What would be the impact if India fails to get a favorable solution? We will discuss all this today with Sompal Shastri, former Union Minister for Agriculture, Nalin Kohli, BJP spokesperson, Salman, Congress spokesperson, Biraj, Patnaik, principal advisor to the commissioners appointed by Supreme Court on right to food, and Nitin, Sethi, associate editor, Business Standard. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Nalin, I would like to come to you first. Your government is being seen as having taken a very aggressive stand in WTO. The countries which are very unhappy with India are saying that this deal was stuck in Bali. Now you are going back on it.
Well, I think one has to understand it in terms of perspective. It's just not about business and trade. It's also about livelihood, and on the other side, it's survival. For those millions, when 25% of the global poor live in India, you just can't ignore that fact just on the name of trade. I think the issue here is with regard to what happens with the subsidy that it takes the form of in terms of grains. There is a concern that India would dump it in the global market.
Right.
But actually that's never been the case. India has never dumped grain in any format, whether it is rice or wheat. We've exported it on international prices whenever we've needed to. Mostly a lot of it goes into the public distribution system. Now there's the sunset clause which is being spoken of. And in this case, we need to see that given the kind of legislations that are in place, given the kind of security net that's required, irrespective of this also, we can't ignore it, especially when the Western world, that's Europe and the USA themselves, subsidize agriculture to a huge figure, over $1 billion a day, which is not a small sum of money. So I think it's these issues that India is putting forth very, very aggressively. Let us see what comes of it, but the government's concern is we can't, in the name of trade, free trade deal, compromise survival of a very large percentage of our population.
This is your party stand and this is the government stand as of now. But let me get Salman. So Salman, the charge against your government, the previous UPA government, was that in Bali, the then Commerce Minister Anand Sharma had agreed to this kind of a deal, had agreed to the fact that we'll have a FTA by July 31st, and then look at other issues about food stocks and things like that later, and 2016 was the deadline for that. Now this government is saying that now the present government is taking a stand that unless there is a policy on food stockpiles, we will not go ahead with this. So the blame, the essential blame seems to be on the UPA government.
Not at all, Girish. The blame seems to be on the government of India. Whatever government of India of the day is. We had the government of India in December. We negotiated a deal which we felt was good for the emerging economies, in which trade facilitation was a big part, which is good for India and emerging economies, because ultimately we also want lower barriers to trade, because that's good for our exporters, that's good for our importers. And we have to modernize our customs, we have to modernize trade in this country, and we have a lot to gain. And otherwise India would be at the receiving end of bilateral and other kind of trade pacts which developed countries would undertake with each other, maybe on the Atlantic side or on the Pacific. I think what people are upset about internationally is some sort of a retrospective regressal here, regression here. The government, I thought this government was against retrospective things, and now, this is not UPA versus NDA. This is the government of India versus government of India. The government of India had a very successful Bali summit by which not only did we do trade facilitation, but we also protected our interests as far as subsidies were concerned to our agricultural sectors. The 4-year time period that was kept for finalizing that agreement does not have a sunset clause. I'm sorry, Nalin Kohli must correct himself. There is no sunset clause as the Americans want it. It's an open-ended kind of term. In 4 years, they have to figure out how to deal with subsidies. If there is no agreement, that doesn't mean India can be penalized by any other country. So we had taken care of our interests. We had made sure that, that a multilateral trading framework remains in place, which is good for India, good for many emerging economies. So I think what the government has done now, I hope they know what they're doing. Maybe they have some information that we did not have at that time, but I doubt it. I think they're being reckless, and I think they're being isolated. Only Bolivia, Venezuela, and Cuba are supporting this position right now. And we're becoming the laughing stock of this country. In fact, of the world. If, by the way, retrospective taxation is bad, this particular step also puts us in a very awkward situation. One government does not respect the commitments of another government. That is not a good way to do business. I'm sorry.
Okay. Nalin, you need to answer that before I go to Mr. Shastri.
I think why didn't you get the other experts in? Because I'm reserving my comment. We've got Biraj, who's worked on the food security. I think he was there in
No, but he's making
Bali.
a serious charge
serious charges, which is true.
Present government is reckless.
He has spoken about retrospective. He's spoken about government of India at war with government of India. He's spoken about India becoming a laughing stock. I mean, certainly Mr. Salman Soles would like to reserve his comment in saying what a laughing stock we became with the mega scandals that we've seen in the last UPA. I mean, 3 of the biggest scandals. No. So, I mean, in terms of laughing stock.
What he says,
no, absolutely, I'm answering that only. I'm talking on the laughing stock. Salman, I didn't interrupt you. Salman,
I
didn't interrupt you. I'm coming back to the point. I'm just simply saying, you've used strong words on the government of India.
WTO,
I'm only, and I think I'm in my right to, just point out that government of India has functioned for 10 years under the Congress UPA, and government of India has functioned for 62 days under Mr. Narendra Modi. So therefore, I do reserve that point of saying if we are a laughing stock also globally, then you can't just be walking away and saying we washed ourselves because the people have, rejected us and brought the government, brought a change.
Okay, I think...
So I think, don't take it down that route.
No, you are not...
the government of India has cogent reasons to raise a question. And the point is, when we have, and I'm going back to it, you are saying there's no sunset clause. My understanding of the picture is not. As if it's no sunset clause, then what are we putting out in there?
Okay. Nalin, Mr. Shastri, you need to bring some clarity to the whole situation. The both of them are blaming each other. Where do we stand now? Do you think that India will be made a laughing stock? Will it become difficult for India if it continues the same line which it is taking at the WTO right now?
You see, for us, as Nalin has said it rightly, is an existential question. It's a question of survival. Trade means earning money and trading in surpluses. But there is a huge portion of our population which is not only malnutrition but starving and underfed. So for that major part of our population, it's a question of life survival and livelihood. And if protecting that makes me a laughing stock, I would opt for it. Don't worry. So I don't worry what is the criticism. And if there is no sunset clause, and if they also had secured the rights of the people who need food, that is food security, then what is the objection being raised now? Then that means that we are in tandem with them. So this means that I have not seen the formulation that was there in the Bali negotiations. But obviously, this scathing criticism, including by the Congress people, saying that government is making a livestock of themselves.
Laughing stock.
That means that the formulation there had something which smells bad. So the formulation has to be seen. But ultimately, protecting the rights to have food, at least in adequate quantity, if not quality, is the birthright. And if it is to be compromised, then we will become a laughing stock.
Okay. Biraj, the two things here. Let us get some clarity on this. In Bali, what happened in Bali? What was the India's stand in Bali? And why is it being criticized now?
Well, in Bali, first, the Americans successfully managed to link trade facilitation, which is an agreement that they want, that the developed world wants, which is in their interest, not so much in our interest, with food security, which is essential to India. So it was an attempt to arm twist India into agreeing to trade facilitation by raising the bogey of food security, which they did very successfully. Are we the laughing stock of the world and are we isolated today? The answer is yes. And the reason for that is right up till the last minute in Bali, we led the G33 up the garden path by making everybody believe that we will not give in on trade facilitation, that we would not agree to a peace clause, that the G33 proposal of fundamentally renegotiating the agreement on agriculture and particularly on, our demand was very simple, that you are calculating subsidy prices at 1986 rates, please update it because inflation has, food prices have gone up by 500%. Please update it. Don't use 1986 prices to calculate our aggregate measure of support, which is the real crux of the problem. And the Americans did not agree to that. After having lost in Bali, we made it out like it was, it was triumphalism.
No.
Anand Sharma
one second. Bali, what was the...
So, agreement
That
with
is
Bali.
wrong.
Agreement
Absolutely wrong.
No,
Totally wrong analysis.
Don't interrupt me. Now,
Salman,
let me tell you.
I'll come to you, please wait.
So, in Bali, the
agreement was that now in Geneva by July 31st, we will agree to this TFA, and for this, as far as stockpiling and things are concerned, there is a 4-year clause for that, and
Yes.
we'll work out a deal by
Yes.
that. Now the Indian government is saying, no, both the deals have to be done simultaneously.
For good reason, and let me explain why. Now, Bali was a flawed agreement because number one, in Bali, all the countries agreed that nobody would take India to a dispute settlement mechanism under the agreement on agriculture. But we remained vulnerable to be taken into the dispute settlement mechanism under the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures, which is not covered under the Bali Agreement, number one. Number two, if you look at the critical text of the Bali Agreement on safeguards, it says, and I want to just read out one line, it says, any developing member seeking coverage of programs under the agreement, para 2, shall ensure that stocks procured under such programs do not distort trade or adversely affect the food security of other members.
Right.
Now, that means any country, despite what is said in the agreement, can claim that India's procurement program is distorting food subsidies and haul us before the dispute settlement mechanism. What has changed India's position dramatically since Bali is the fact that 3 countries, the United States, Canada and Pakistan, have dragged India into the Committee on Agriculture and asked India to produce its figures on calculation of subsidies, which is part of the Bali Agreement. Fair enough. But my point to Salman Soz and the others who are defending this is that if there is such touching faith in this 4-year peace clause, what was the need for the Americans to rush to the Committee on Agriculture and demand these figures? This is the first step in dragging us to the dispute settlement mechanism. And this government is recognizing that and linking the two. Not that I have faith that they will stay the course. I don't have much to, but we can come to that later.
We'll come to that later. Salman, would you like to react before I go to the next guest?
First of all, the Congress Party and the UPA brought the Food Security Act and the BJP supported, and that is an act that is very dear to us. So we are sure, absolutely sure why we wanted that act, because we need to provide for our people. We would never do, the government of India would never do then or now anything that would jeopardize the interests of those who need us the most. But at the same time, this country has to progress. We need to have more trade. We have such great opportunities there, and we would have to reform anyway. And we are doing this, and we will grow because of trade. And by the way, with protection under the 4-year clause, and by the way, if we do not have an agreement internationally under the WTO framework, that does not mean that any punitive measures can be taken, because the 4 years are there to get a deal done.
Okay.
So we had sought some breathing room.
I have the agreement. I have the agreement in front of me.
One final point.
Just read it
One
out.
final point.
Yes.
One final point. One final point, please. And it is not as if the government of India at that time went around tom-tomming that we won and everybody else lost. Yes, we took credit, but around the world, unless the media around the world, including in India, is conspiring, to make the government of India of the time look good, you have to be careful. You cannot just say that, government of India was taking all the credit by itself. Everybody was giving credit to India, including the emerging countries.
Okay.
And now, why isn't Brazil, for example, or China supporting us right now? If we led them a garden path and then did not deliver, then why did they support us then? Why are they not supporting us now?
Okay.
Please tell me.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Biraj. Nitin, put everything in a journalistic perspective now. You heard everybody. Now, do you think that what the Indian government is doing is right? Do you think it will be able to carry it through? As Biraj is having some doubts about that.
I think there were 2 or 3 things that have happened and one that is happening now. 2, when UPA went in negotiating at the Bali round, it went with options open. It went with 3 options that the cabinet powered it with, A, B and C, and it came out with the 4th one which no one knew about, which was D. And literally the UPA government had no clue what it was going to negotiate against. In contrast to that, the NDA government seems to know where it's going. Unfortunately, it's got its chips balanced against it. What it's trying to do is recover that some ground that was lost at the Bali level. Now, it's a difficult task. There is a lack of trust with other partners in the developing countries because we have played a dirty trick last time around, as Biraj was talking about it. It's a difficult task because you must remember multilateral negotiations are a place where you do get a bloody nose whenever you negotiate, and each country comes representing its own national interests.
Right.
So to say whether I've got isolated or not is not really the question you should ask. You should ask how much of what you went wishing to win have you come back with. Obviously, we will not win entirely, and I have serious doubts about how much NDA can win because it's got its back against the wall this time. But I hope it does recover some of the lost ground in the last round.
Okay.
I mean, I just want to comment on one point. I mean, this great trade facilitation is fantastic. It's going to bring about $1 trillion of trade. It's going to create 20 million jobs. You know, this is the myth that the Americans have been spreading. This figure of 1 trillion was drawn up by the International Chamber of Commerce, and scholar upon serious scholar has shown that this figure has no basis because it estimates the benefits of trade facilitation without factoring in the costs which are being borne by developing countries, number one. Number two, this job growth business is again completely fictitious because you're not looking at the job losses that will come in because of the cutback. Your manufacturing sector will suffer because of increasing trade. So trade facilitation will benefit primarily the West, it will benefit primarily the developed countries, and we are just being taken for a ride on this. Whoever believes that it's going to revolutionize India, bring about a 5% increase in India's GDP is completely off their own.
Okay, Nalin, I know you're very happy that you got a lot of support here in the panel.
No, it's not about happy.
But the question is this. If everybody agrees, despite the fact that everybody is supporting what the government is doing, at least most of the people are supporting what the government stand in Geneva right now. The question is, if you continue with this stand, if the government continues with this stand, and if it is not able to carry it through in Geneva, what happens? Well, I mean, is the government prepared for the backlash?
Well, I mean, let me just be very clear. A government is expected to go in there looking at all the options that will be there and all the possible outcomes. With each outcome will come a set of issues. Now, as far as Government of India is concerned, what is our priority for? Is it towards first the people at our end and protecting them? And here we are talking of the most marginalized segments of society. Or are we out there to win brownie points and image? The same thing was said when India went and tested the nuclear device in 1998. Oh, we shouldn't do it. What will the world think, etc., etc. What will happen with the sanctions? We will get devastated. We did survive that. We survived the Asian currency crisis. We need to have a little more faith about our own country before we start worrying. If you look at it in the world, there are only 3 or 4 engines that offer the potential to kind of build the global economy beyond what it is. Those engines are primarily in Asia, and whether we like it or we don't like it, China and India are an important part of it. May not be the only. There are other emerging economies that are extremely important. So from that perspective, why this loss of faith? And I think the point here is, and everyone's putting it in perspective, it's not about me winning an argument or not. The government has gone in there. The government will look at the interest of India first. And I think on that, you can't have an argument. There is no argument.
Okay. Mr. Shastri, what is a permanent solution to this? India is saying in Geneva that there needs to be a permanent solution on the food stocks. So what is the permanent solution that India can look forward to?
See, till India reaches a certain stage of development, which we are far away from by all standards, by any standards, and these are not things which are unknown. Till then, we have to ensure the survival of the people who are known to be poor by the even the statistics collected and given out by the institutions like the World Bank and everyone. So food security, I would like to reiterate, and with all the emphasis at my command, is of absolute concern for us. It's not a relative term. We are not, and then when these generalities in a very ambiguous and very high sounding phrases coined by the WTO proponents and those, and which are repeated by my friend Mr. Soos, that we have to progress, we have to enhance trade, we have to compete in the world. These are all things when we reach a certain stage of surplus or a state of surplus which we are not in. So whether we can afford to trade food security for this objective? No, it should not be. Even if we suffer in trade, we should not accept that. This is my firm stand, and I think to that extent I support what the government has taken. And if he says that they also had ensured food security, and then we are all, this government are also saying...
No, he is rightfully claiming that it is their government who brought in Food Security Act.
Then what is the criticism then?
Then
what is the difference between the UPA government
and Salman, exactly.
Support the NDA government.
No, that's the point. That's the point.
What is the difference? What is the difference?
Salman, please listen to this.
First of all...
No, Salman, please listen to my question.
Let me repeat my question, please. He has to be specific on whether we are not being asked to trade off food security for the sake of trade.
Are we
for the interest of the developed countries rather than the poor who are risking their existence.
Salman, okay, the question is this.
Are we protected enough? That's the question.
Was the UPA government trading off food security for other trade, for what you're talking about being part of the global trade and things like that? Was that a trade-off? And is it that Nalin Kohli and his party and the government, present government, is trying to wriggle out of that situation which your government had put us into?
Food security is of utmost importance to the Congress party and the government of India, whether it is Mr. Modi's or whether it is Mr. Manmohan Singh's. Let us be clear about that. We brought that act in. Please, let me finish now. I didn't interrupt you. Mr. Shastri expects specificity from me, and he talks only in generalities. You know, he should come with some specifics and stop giving lectures, I think. Second, Girish, you talked about how you had support for Nalin Kohli's point of view. It depends on how you constitute a panel. I was with Nalin just the other day on a different TV show where the majority of them were against what Nalin Kohli and Biraj were saying. If you look at newspaper after newspaper, two were
evenly poised against the others, not majority. There were four of us, two were evenly poised.
So I'm just saying
that's immaterial.
That's not material. No, Nalin, you forget. You were in the minority on that other day too. Please, today that's the way the panel is constituted, and that is why it may seem that people are supporting you. Read any newspaper in this country. Read any newspaper, and they're saying that the government is engaging in the wrong. Is on the wrong path on this one. If they get something, good for them. But if they don't, then they should not come out and say, oh, we were victorious and we put our concerns forward. Okay?
Okay, I have a point to make. Just a quick point.
By the way, the government of India
one second,
did ensure that food, I was just saying that the government of India at that time did ensure that food security was not given up. That was something that we protected. Because India led that movement. India led that movement to protect
Nalin, I want. Okay, Salman. Okay. Yes, Nitin.
What happened at the Bali round was that you had two deals. One deal that has to be concluded in a year, and then the other deal which is to be concluded over the next few years.
4 years. That's what.
4 years. And the 4-year deal is in our favor. The 1-year deal is what the West wants. Now we have no bargaining chips because the other deal gets over by the 1 year. What India is trying to do is actually get back a few bargaining chips to make sure that this deal gets sealed slightly better in our favor. What India perhaps doing wrong is it started too late in the day, even talking to its own media, explaining the positions it's been taken and why it's taking those places. I think that's a bad mistake it's done as compared to UPA, which didn't know where it was going to begin with.
Okay.
I just want to add 2 quick points. See, I think the point
One technical point.
Yes, 1 second. Yes, Salman, very quickly. Since you think that you're in minority,
I just want to make the point that if food security, only on this panel, by the way, not outside. If food security remains a problem within 4 years, it cannot be enforced that clause cannot be enforced because WTO...
Yes, you made that point earlier. Yes, yes.
I think, the point here is, what Salman is doing is, Salman is, look, I think the point here is, let's get the bottom line clear. Every country has to, at the end of the day, work for its own interests.
Absolutely.
And as I think Nitin put it very eloquently, you come out with a bloody nose irrespective of it, because after all, there will be a give and take. The point is, you may be protected against X, but as Biraj is pointing out, and that's my understanding too, that through another mechanism, which is through subsidies, you can be hauled back. So the question is, you may have a Food Security Act, but if in the same process you are being hit on subsidies, which is in agriculture specifically, how are you going to deliver the food?
Last point.
Number two.
Last point.
No, 1 minute, hold on.
Very quickly.
Very quick. One more sentence.
I will tell you.
One second.
I will tell you.
Well, I mean,
wait, Salman, please.
So the second point I want to make is that, this whole thing, what's about the global thing, 27 times the International Herald Tribune pointed out as the consumption of electricity a few years ago in the West versus, say, a person like in India. So therefore, we are supposed to, the environment deal is head up because of that also. We are supposed to look at everything from the Western construct and therefore negate the fact that we are not on the same construct.
Biraj, my question. My question, because we are running out of time. So essentially, there is no trust at the WTO level. India doesn't trust anybody, other countries. This is where the things stand today. How do we develop trust? Or do you think there will be any trust? We have 3 days left for this July 31st with a deadline. And then after that, what happens? I want you to inform viewers of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things as an article of faith that the United States and the developed world can do is to agree to the changing of the base price from 1986 to 2014 to factor in inflation. That would reassure India to a very large extent. I don't know why the Americans are not doing it. Okay. Why do they want to hold that as a bargaining chip till the very last minute? Number one. Number two.
The Indian government has put this point clearly during the negotiations?
It has been made, it was made absolutely clear in Bali. It has been made absolutely clear here. I was at Bali at the negotiation, following it very closely. I think, my view, I mean, I don't want to get into an argument with Salman on the Food Security Act, because that's something that I worked very closely, as you are aware, over the years on. So let's not talk about, who represents food security here. But the point is that a no deal is better than a bad deal.
No deal
we are faced with a bad deal now.
Mr. Sompal, Shastri, would you agree with that?
No.
As of today, in Geneva, I'll come to Salman. Salman, please wait. Mr. Shastri, would you agree with Biraj? No deal is a better deal at this point of time?
I've already said that.
You already said
very firmly. Secondly, you see,
yes,
looking to the experience that we had since the incarnation or the emergence of WTO, that it would be a free, fair and equitable regime of trade, and particularly on the issue of subsidies, these people, when they put things in the finer print, which not only avoids or evades the main clause, but it thwarts the main clause, putting those in the blue box, in the amber box, and then the green box, and increasing the subsidies from 38% to 44% in OECD. So how can we
have Salman, very quickly, so Salman.
This is a question of intentions, who we are dealing with.
Salman, very quickly.
If they don't want to be in the WTO, let India withdraw from the WTO. Let WTO be finished, and then we'll see.
I really want to know.
We can't protect the lives of our people.
We should be speaking as a representative of the United States or the WTO.
1 second.
This is a very strange thing from this group.
We should.
Okay,
no problem.
Nitin, very quickly, last words to you.
If you do not want to be in the WTO, just say it.
Okay,
Salman. I take offense to that. I take offense to it, and I'm putting the offense on record.
Nalin,
hang on. I mean, we are speaking about India. And not the interests of Indians.
Nitin,
we are not speaking here about the interests of WTO.
Okay, Nitin, very quickly, last word.
The WTO framework is in India's interest. Get it into your head.
Okay, Salman, you have made your point.
Too often in the past, we've gone to multilateral forums saying that the only red line we have at the end of the day is that we should not be seen standing alone. I think that's a very bad start to have.
Okay, so
as long as we go with a red line saying we'll stand with what we think is in our favor,
so would you agree with Biraj that no deal is a better deal at this point of time, and it would not affect the country's interests in other matters?
I think we've already stitched a deal, unfortunately, a year ago. What we're trying to do is reclaim a bit. If we can't reclaim, we might as well have a status quo.
Okay, let us see what will happen if the status quo can be maintained. Well, another 3 days to go. We'll see how the government of India will tackle the situation which will arise out of it. Will also be watched closely. Thanks to all my guests, Nalin, Kohli, Biraj, Patnaik, Sompal, Shastri, Nitin, Sethi and Salman. So please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue in the big picture on Wednesday. Tomorrow is Eid. Happy Eid to all of you.